We're here now with our OSU Extension Livestock Marketing Specialist, Dr. Derrell Peel. So Derrell, we're into April now, so we've pretty much got the first quarter of the year under our belt. So what is the herd rebuilding looking like?
You know, this has been the question for many months is, are we starting any heifer retention that would lead to herd rebuilding? We don't have any data yet to suggest for sure that that's happening. The January 1 inventory numbers told us that we got smaller a little bit last year as far as the beef cow herd goes. The heifer inventory was down. So we don't have a lot of animals to work with at this point. So, and again, there's no data at this point to suggest that we are in fact rebuilding the herd.
So we got our inventory on January 1st. Is this kind of low for this cattle cycle?
Well, that's a question that remains to be seen. It could be the low, but we know how many bred heifers we brought into this year. That was in the January report. So the question of whether the herd gets smaller in 2025 or could actually grow slightly will depend on cow culling this year. So at this point in the year, beef cow slaughter is down enough that would allow for a slight increase in the beef cow herd in 2025 relative to the number of bred heifers that we have. But it's going to depend on cow culling for the rest of the year. That's probably going to depend on whether we have more drought that forces additional liquidation or forces us to cut back on the decrease in cow slaughter this year.
So if we see some more rain, which we're kind of expecting to get some more rain here pretty soon, will that kind of help offset that low number?
It could. The weather conditions are one of the factors that producers are watching closely. If the drought conditions don't develop, if the threat doesn't look too high, then producers may start saving heifers. They may cut back on cow culling, and so that would allow for some herd increase in 2025.
Going into this next year, do we expect to see this kind of turn around a little bit?
Well, it also kind of depends, in the January inventory report this year, we know how many heifer calves we had that we said we were going to breed this year for next year. So that number is also given, and it's a very low number. However, we can always breed some additional heifers. That happens every year. And so again, it's going to depend a lot on weather conditions. If producers decide that there's some heifers out there that might be feeder heifers, but if conditions look good and they decide to, they may decide to breed some of those heifers. So we could set up for a little bit better prospects for growth in 2026, although I think they'll still be fairly limited.
Yeah, so what kind of data are you going to be looking at to monitor the herd rebuilding?
We only get inventory numbers January 1. USDA says they're going to give us a July inventory report this year. That will be helpful. It will give us an indication of heifer retention as well as the 2025 calf crop. The problem is we didn't get that report last year, so it's going to be a little bit hard to interpret that report. Beyond that, we watch the slaughter data for heifers, and so, but the problem is that's 5 or 6 months behind. When heifer slaughter starts to go down, the decisions were made, 5 or 6 months ago. We also get a quarterly number that shows the number of heifers in feedlots. And so the next one of those will actually come out later in April with the April Cattle on Feed report. That could be our first indication of heifer retention if in fact it's happening.
Yeah, so with all these things that we just talked about, how can producers implement this into their day-to-day?
I think individual producers are evaluating their individual situation as far as forage conditions and forage prospects, trying to decide, obviously markets are record high. They would like to take advantage of those. The market's telling us to rebuild the herd and sell more calves and take advantage of this market. So I think producers individually just have to figure out what their best strategy is to take advantage of this market.
Yeah, well, we'll hope to see some rise in those numbers and some rain coming our way.
You bet.
Thanks, Derrell.